Christ myth must have come from that. And if you read post-hoc or false cause fallacy, right, that is number, the last one, faulty reasoning that confuses timing with causation. Just because something happened before something doesn't mean that thing happened because of that thing, right? Man, this is annoying. Let me fix that for a moment.
Sit down.
Just because something happened before something doesn't mean that it happened because of that thing, okay? And this is actually a very popular claim out there. There's something called the Christ myth theory out there, which is that it goes way, many people believe Jesus wasn't the Son of God, or not many, but a lot of people, but there's people who believe that Jesus wasn't even a real historical figure. Right. That there wasn't even a human being at some point named Jesus called the Christ myth, and everything the Bible says about Jesus is just the Jewish version of earlier myths. And so this is a theory out there. But again, essentially what it is it's a false cause fallacy, okay? Just because something came before something doesn't mean it came from that thing. Particularly when you think about, why is it that Jews would use old Egyptian myths to create a Messiah? That doesn't make any sense, you know what I mean? Like you would have to show that, the Jews had a different religion entirely. You know what I mean? A different belief system entirely. Just because that existed earlier in some other country doesn't mean that would become the basis for the Jesus account. Saying God created the universe is not a truly satisfying explanation of origins, because then you have to ask the question, who created God? What do you think? Yeah. Genetic fallacy. Sorry, let me find if that is the same as also called fallacy origin. Close, but that's not what's going on here. Yeah.
Begging the question?
No, not begging the question. Accident exception. Category mistake. All right, category mistake. Let's think this through. Category mistake. You got a snazzy pen. So, what is assumed in this question, who created God? The assumption in that question is what? That God, the idea of God is in the category of things that require a creator. But if the very proposition and definition of God is that He is the creator, then by definition, it's an incompatible question. God is the creator. God isn't something that is created. It's a category mistake, right? It's an apple to oranges kind of thing. And a very basic one that many skeptics make a lot. Actually, Dawkins and Lennox get into that a little bit as well. I can't believe that God would allow people to suffer, burn, and experience pain in a place like hell. If you ever experience a moment of torture, you know how horrible it is. And how could you ever sustain torture in a place with no hope? The suffering we see in the world, starvation of children, genocide wars, nothing compared to the idea of hell. How could God do such a thing? Yes. Appeal to emotion. That's right. So appeal to emotion is number 7. You're kind of manipulating. Come on up and get a prize. All right. So it's ignoring the logic of an argument. You're sort of doing an end around a logical argument. Just make an appeal to some level of emotion, pity, anger, desperation, right? Happiness, okay? And again, it's not that the emotions of some of these truths are irrelevant. The point is that if you're making a logical argument, right, we're not doing an emotionally based type of thing here, right? It's got to be logically based, and doing an end around that to just appeal to some emotion in the audience doesn't make the point valid. It only gets people stirred up. Hopefully that makes sense. It gets appeal to emotion. The Bible is just a bunch of fantasy stories featuring characters like a talking snake, zombies rising from the dead, and magic. We never take such accounts seriously in a modern setting. We likely think the authors have been doing drugs when they wrote these things. Yeah. There is an ad hominem in the last sentence, yes, but on the whole, straw man, okay? The straw man, why don't both of you come up and get a prize? Yeah. Straw man, so that is number 11. Describing an opponent's view inaccurately, right, or dressing it down, it's making it easier to criticize and reject. The idea of a straw man is like, if I'm in a wrestling match, it's real convenient for me if I make my opponent a straw man, and then I can go and tackle him down really easily. And so it's inaccurately portraying the opponent's view or position, making it easier to tackle or to take down, and making it easier to dismiss. The Bible cannot seriously be considered a relevant document as it came from a culture where slavery was legal, women lacked rights, and simple modern conventions like electricity would have been considered miraculous. Great, genetic fallacy. Come on up. Also called the fallacy of origin. It focuses on the source of a point or issue and argues against the point or issue by attacking the source. This all may be true, but that doesn't mean that the things that the Bible says are invalid, right? Right. It's an end around the point. Yes, this is where it came from, but that's not the issue, right? If the issue is the Bible is relevant or valid, where it comes from doesn't matter, right? Are things that the Bible says still valid and relevant, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. Awesome. So yes, genetic fallacy. I don't think the resurrection accounts of the New Testament are serious historical events. Christian scholars and historians who argue that the resurrection was an historical event from God do so to justify their livelihood and get naive people to buy their books. Yeah. An ad hominem attack, that's right. Like the issue or the point is, are the resurrection accounts of the New Testament, is that serious history? Okay? And where the point goes is it's attacking the character of Christian scholars who purport that, right? But that has nothing to do. So what if those scholars really are trying to sell books and make a living? You still have to deal with the arguments and the issues involved in are the resurrection accounts legitimate history, right? It's attacking the character of a person instead of dealing with the point. When I read about the pastor of a megachurch who was recently indicted on charges of fraud and embezzlement, it reminded me that churches are money-making operations. Yeah. Yeah, generalization, sure. And what is that? That's it's just drawing a stereotype, right, to come to an incorrect conclusion. All right, highlight. Enhance those right, so it's just a stereotype and a generalization. Here you have one instance of something where, yeah, maybe this pastor was running his megachurch like a money-making operation, but it's a big incorrect leap to just say, now churches in general are, right? Since faith is unjustified and irrational belief, arguments that claim to present reasonable bases to believe in God fall short because God's a faith claim which cannot be justified rationally. Yeah. Yeah, I believe, yeah, begging the question or circular reasoning. Come on up. of declaring, look, faith is unjustified and irrational belief, right? And so if you let that go, if you accept that, then it's all just going to come full circle, right? But it's just a big circle, right? You're just assuming, you're arguing the thing that has been assumed. And so you've done an end around there. All right, religion has been used to justify horrible things. This one might be a little bit tricky. I can take a couple of numbers. Yeah. Yeah, right. Ambiguous, right? It's a very vague and ambiguous statement, right? Religion, okay, which religion? Well, lots of things have been used to justify horrible things, right? What are we saying here, right? You just don't let that fly. You got to fill that out. What do you mean by religion? What do you mean by horrible things? And anything can be used to justify horrible things and have. So what are we really saying here, right? The point is ambiguous and it's kind of trivial. All right. Speaker 1, the Gospel of Mark, which is accepted by scholars as the earliest of the Gospels, written in a generation of eyewitnesses, provides an early source for an eyewitness account of Jesus' empty tomb and adds credibility to the historical claims of the resurrection. Speaker 2, and this is what we're getting at here, well, details of the resurrection account described in Mark differ from some of the details in the other later Gospels. Do you accept Luke, Matthew, and John as credible accounts as well? How do you reconcile the differences between the accounts? What do you think? What has Speaker 2 done? Yeah. Sorry? Not so much. Yeah. A red herring, right. Number 13, red herring. Diverting the conversation onto a different track and arriving at an unrelated point. What was the point of Speaker 1? Speaker's one point is that Mark is an early witness and provides credibility to the resurrection claim. That was Speaker 1's point. Speaker 2 got off track and ended up talking about what? Not whether Mark is early and provides credibility, but talking about Matthew, Luke, and John, right? That's a different point and a different track that's been deserted off, but it was done in sort of a sneaky manner, right? Because it starts on the same point, but then diverts it off onto something else. Speaker 2 now is completely not dealing with what Speaker 1 has said about Mark being an early witness that gives credibility to the historical claims of the resurrection. As a scientist, I determine what is true based on proof. Therefore, I cannot accept that God exists unless I can see the proof of such a claim. What do you think? No, not so much. What do you think? No, not accident exception. Although, you know what? A good argument could be made for that. What I have here is faulty or weak analogy. You see, a faulty or weak analogy. The scientist is taking faith in God and he's making it analogous to some lab experiment, right? And so the problem is that that's a bad analogy, right? Faith in God is not like proof that we see in a lab experiment. But where accident exception applying a general rule to us, well, it doesn't. No, because those are two specific, those are two individually specific things. But you know what? Come up and get a prize. What we'll do now, brothers and sisters, is we will take our break. Okay, we'll take another 15-minute break and reconvene at around 11 o'clock. Yeah, great. We'll reconvene at 11 o'clock and get into some new stuff in terms of dealing with arguments. So. Wait.